Augustus, the first ever emperor of Rome, is most famous for the countless military successes he achieved during his long and tyrannical tenure. Yet, in 21 BC, at the height of his power, he was completely embarrassed by the most unlikely of leaders. Amanirenas of the Kush was not only a woman of color, but she was also disabled, possessing only one working eye. Thanks to her efforts, Augustus, the self-proclaimed son of God, was forced to surrender and to accept every one of her demands. Here is the story of how an African queen dominated the most powerful man in the world. Between 40 BC and 10 BC, the mysterious African kingdom of Kush, located in modern-day Sudan, was ruled over by the legendary Queen Amanirenas. She was a woman of remarkable stature, towering over her men and sporting 3 battle scars on her face. Her conflict with Rome would further disfigure her, leading to the loss of one of her eyes. Governing alongside her husband, King Teretequus, her domain was rich beyond imagination, possessing vast quantities of gold, iron, and ivory. The wealth of this obscure realm, located at the fringes of the known world, was something that Augustus was very aware of following his triumph against Cleopatra and arch-rival Mark Antony in 30 BC in neighboring Egypt. The Romans were no doubt curious to see and to pillage the fabled palace of Queen Amanirenas, which reportedly had brick-vaulted rooms adorned with enormous blocks of pure gold and ivory. In fact, it would take only a year for the new overlords of Egypt to extend their campaigns south towards the Kush. Gaius Cornelius Gallus, the first governor of Augustan Egypt, would make the first Roman incursions into the shadowy northern Kushite frontier. After subduing a revolt in the south of Egypt, he audaciously crossed the border to lay claim to the Kushite island of Philae, situated in Lower Nubia. With Queen Amanirenas too weak to mount a counterattack, she was forced to concede her territory and to accept the authority of the local lord, who had been chosen to look after Roman interests in the region. But the queen's capitulation was also an astute political move, giving her enough time to prepare a relief force that could overcome the Mediterranean conquerors at a later date. In the meantime, the Romans began to unfairly treat their new subjects, imposing eye-wateringly high taxes on local merchants and even claiming tax rights on communities allied to the Kush. With her people desperate for liberation, the queen, biding her time, was rewarded for her patience when a tantalizing opportunity to recapture what was hers presented itself in 26 BC. Eager to establish the Pax Romana in the east, Augustus made the decision to redeploy the majority of his 15,000-strong Roman contingents to Arabia, leaving Lower Nubia wide open and vulnerable to attack. The relative inactivity on the Egypt-Kush border in the ensuing period after the invasion of Philae had given Augustus a false sense of security. It was a laxness that Queen Amanirenas was quick to take advantage of, and at the same time Roman soldiers were withdrawing, she launched a devastating invasion into Lower Nubia that would spill into Egypt. Commanding an outfit of 30,000 men alongside her husband King Teretequas, Queen Amanirenas' battalions advanced into Egypt through the Nile mudflats, overwhelming all resistance, to murder and enslave the local population. Within a short space of time, the queen had taken the entire region of Triacontatianus, an area that was 200 square miles big. She not only retook Philae, but plundered and terrorized the cities of Syene and Elephantine, destroying and defacing the images of Augustus wherever she went. After the Kushites were done ravaging Rome's prized province, they retreated back to their stronghold at Pselchis, taking with them thousands of Roman captives, chests brimming with priceless treasures, and perhaps most symbolically, the head of an Augustus statue. At home, she would further humiliate Rome's supreme sovereign, burying his head under the entry steps to her temple to Amun to ensure that the image of the emperor was always trampled on. Rome, however, wasn't finished, and the Kushites' next task was to survive her vengeance. In response, the new governor of Egypt, Gaius Petronius, led an army of 10,000 men and 800 cavalry to rescue prisoners and to reprimand the insolent Kushite empress. With King Teretequas dying suddenly, Queen Amanirenas took full command of her armies, to the great confusion of the Roman envoys, who were stunned that a woman was in charge. So great was their surprise that they reported back to Petronius that the Kushites possessed no leader, for it was impossible for them to even comprehend that a female could assume the responsibilities of men. The two powers clashed just outside of Pselchis, and although the Kushites outnumbered the Romans 3-1, they found it incredibly difficult to deal with the superior arms and better training of their European foe. The invaders decimated Kushite ranks, and Queen Amanirenas' defenders were forced to either flee into the desert or to escape back to the city. Some even dived into the Nile, setting up a defensive position on a small island that was brutally crushed by swarms of legionnaires transported on rafts and boats. With the Romans on the front foot, Petronius harbored even grander ambitions, drawing up plans to make the entire Kush realm a province of imperial Rome. Before this, however, Petronius was adamant to find out more about the Kushite chain of command, for he was still unconvinced that Queen Amanirenas was their true leader. Whilst being interrogated by the Romans, Amanirenas' generals used this to their advantage, telling Petronius that a male chief called Akinidad, the son of the queen, existed and that he was based in the northern city of Napata. Believing that Napata was the Kush capital, Petronius marched his tiring men there to find out that they had been tricked. Napata was nothing like the illustrious citadel described by the Kushite generals, but a half-deserted city that had been abandoned hundreds of years prior. He learned that the real Kush center, Meroe, was in fact 330 miles south. In his anger, Petronius enslaved the local population and considered his next move. Finding himself 570 miles from the nearest Roman settlement, which was almost as long as the whole length of Egypt, he decided it was best for his weary legions to return back home. Queen Amanirenas, however, was not done. As the Romans made their way back to Alexandria, the queen made their life a living nightmare, sending wave upon wave of marauding warriors to assault their exhausted battalions and to free the slaves they had taken with them. By 24 BC, Queen Amanirenas had chased the Romans out of Dacia and liberated her kingdom once and for all, but at a huge personal cost. As well as losing her eye, her son, Akinidad, was slain on the battlefield. Her injuries, physical and emotional, only further fueled her rage. When the Romans, broken and bedraggled, finally reached the frontier, the queen did not stop, and over the next 2 years, Egypt itself would be blighted by constant Kushite raids. In 22 BC, the unrelenting queen sent another army to annihilate the Roman occupiers, who were now stationed at the border town of Primis. Their stronghold being located on the top of a hill, they suddenly found themselves surrounded on all sides by Kushite hordes. The Romans, however, were protected from a frontal attack by their ballista cannons, which could fire deadly projectiles at any enemy within range. In the stalemate, Petronius suggested the queen air her grievances to Augustus himself, who, at that very moment, was preparing for an assault on Syria on the Greek island of Samos. After years of non-stop combat, the burnt-out Egyptian prefect was ready to broker peace by any means necessary. The Kushites responded in jest, proclaiming they had no idea who Augustus was. But when Petronius offered to escort them to Samos, they accepted, sending envoys in place of their queen, for the acclaimed Augustus was not worthy of her presence. At the Treaty of Samos in 21 BC, Kushite ambassadors presented Augustus with a quiver of golden arrows and a stern message from their queen that read, "If you want peace, they are a token of her warmth and friendship. If you want war, you will need them." Augustus granted her every wish, recognizing the sovereignty of the Kush, giving back all seized settlements, and promising to never impose himself on her domains ever again. In a bid to appease them even more, he even ordered his administrators to collaborate with the Kushites to help them build and enlarge their temples at Kalabsha and Dendur. After tearing down all of the statues of Augustus, Queen Amanirenas and her people entered a golden age of peace and prosperity, lasting until her death in 10 BC. Roman commentators were often perplexed by this female warlord, and in a sign of their respect they would often compare her to a man. Strabo, the Greek philosopher, would praise her for her masculine character and how she displayed courage above that of her gender. Yet Queen Amanirenas of the Kush was no man, but simply a lion-hearted woman who crushed other men. As history shows, even Emperor Augustus, the mightiest of them all, was no match for this iconic African empress. Don't forget to click that other icon as well, the subscribe button, for more.